to be able to know how to weather, difficult experiences, emotions, and situations are required. And so that we can meet the demands of the moment. So I need to first invest in my inner life and my habits and practices so I can be a great teammate, so that I can, if enough of those do that in the kind of the same setting, we end up being a great team.
Most people think confidence and resilience are just part of your personality. But the truth is, they're skills you can train, and today you'll see how. Welcome to How Leaders Lead. I'm David Novak, and every week I have conversations with the best leaders in the world to help you become the best leader that you can be. Today I'm talking with Dr. Michael Gervais, one of the most respected performance psychologists in the world. He's worked with Super Bowl champions, Olympic gold medalists, and top Fortune 500 CEOs. At his company, Finding Mastery, he helps people train their minds to perform under pressure, to stay focused, to build confidence, and to live with purpose. Basically, he coaches the best people in the world to get even better. And in this conversation, he shares the same tools and ideas with you so that you can gain an edge in your own personal performance. If you need a confidence boost, if you want to build a stronger team, or if you just know you're capable of more, but you're not sure how to get there, this episode is a treasure trove of insights. So here's my conversation with my good friend and soon to be yours, Dr. Michael Gervais. I think this will be a really fun podcast for everybody because what I want to do is basically help you lead a coaching session with business leaders so they can get your perspective on how you would approach certain things as you think about how you lead at work and how you take people with you. So I think it'll be a lot of fun as we explore this. But I want to kind of start before we get into that. I always like to take people back a little bit, Michael. And what's the story from your childhood that really shaped the kind of leader you are today?
I love these types of questions. I feel like there's okay, so this is as a trained psychologist, I could go to a lot of places here, right? So let's narrow the playing field down a little bit. I grew up early days on a farm in Virginia, and it was not a fancy farm. This was a farm where when it got cold outside during the winter, we had to figure out how to get water from our well. This was a bit Spartan. My parents were young when they got married, young when they had me. This is the 70s. They wanted to drop out. They wanted a better life than that they were living in the cities. And so they found a dirt road, followed it for a long time. And there was no street lights. When that started to kind of shift and change, and there wasn't many houses around, they found something they could almost afford. And they said, we're going to build a family here. I got my roots learning from Mother Nature. So my parents were very laissez-faire. Okay. So what that means is like natural consequences were my teacher. And of course they created some boundaries, but like parenting harshly or let me fast forward, like just to make the point here is that I didn't take my SAT. I didn't take my PSAT. I went surfing when we finally moved to California. I went surfing because my parenting style was like, you'll figure it out, kid. So now back to the farm when I'm, 8 years old, and the distinct moment that I realized, oh boy, if I don't come home, because I was playing in the backyard in our creek with the kind of the Blue Hill grasses and amazing landscape, is when it got dark and I didn't get home, it got really scary out there. Okay, so I have a distinct memory. Pay attention to Mother Nature. You've got to figure some stuff out in your own life. And this is really going to be fun, but it could be really scary if you don't tune to nature. So that was an early life framing for me.
Yeah, my mother grew up on a farm, so I spent a little time out on farms, and it's a really great environment. You said your parents basically let you kind of find your way, and you have a very calm, Zen-like behavior to a certain extent. And from my research, I understand when you're a kid, you got a lot of fist fights. I mean,
where
how did that happen?
Did you pull that from? Okay, yes. I was a young, naive tuned to nature kid. And then my dad said, all right, family, we're going to the West Coast. I got a job, and the job is pulling me, there's a great opportunity. And so I went from, Hickville to suburbia, and I'm now in fourth grade. And I distinctly remember I didn't fit in. Everybody was a little different than me. I spoke differently. I thought differently. I didn't have the right clothes, the right bike. I didn't have anything that was of interest to the other kids. And I just remember there was this. It was in fifth grade. The kid says to me, "Choose you out." So what does that mean? Choose you out after school. I was like, I don't know what that means. And it meant like we're going to fight after school. And so I figured it out, and I was like, oh, okay. So I showed up. I didn't know what to do. He wasn't there. So I went home and told my parents about it. And my grandmother is Irish and Italian. I identify with my Italian roots. My dad has a bunch of Irish roots. And so they sat me down and taught me how to fight. And so how to street fight. And it paid dividends. So the next day I got in a fight, my first fight. And to just tell you how wild the kind of my family was, I'm in the middle of a fight, and I see my mom, my dad, and my grandmother in the car watching, just to make sure it didn't get out of control. But they were very happy that, I was going to defend myself. I mean, that would never fly now. It would, I would never do that with my son. I was terrified, but I was not I'm not violent. I don't like violence. But that was every year, multiple times a year, all the way until I was 30. This is tragic now. This gets really sad. So I didn't know I had all this anxiety underneath the surface. So I didn't know what to do with the anxiety. So it came out through aggression. And I met my wife in high school, and we fell in love at a very young age. And I was the age of 30. And I came home from a pickup basketball game, and she said, what are you doing with your life? And so she says, I got to tell you, one time I thought it was cool that you know how to defend yourself and me or somebody else. I really felt safe, and I liked that. But now I got to tell you, I'm really repulsed by it. And I thought, I have a crisis here. I don't know what to do with my emotions. And I made a decision from that point forward that violence is not part of my way, and I need to figure it out. And so I went and worked on my anxiety, and it led me to a whole set of practices that materially have changed my life. And now I think about how freeing it feels to be at home with myself, wherever I am, in whatever room I'm in or inhabit that I'm part of. I have a general sense, and of course I'm not perfect with anything, but I have a general sense of how to feel at home. And I think that is, other people might say peaceful or whatever, but I'm not always peaceful inside myself, but I do feel at home with myself. So I wouldn't recommend the path. I don't want my son to ever experience that, in their life. But I'm glad you bring this up, David, because I do think that there is a rich value in knowing how to really stand in front of another human and sometimes have to fight for what you believe is right. And I don't mean violence, but when you and another person in a public space, meaning other kids or adults or whatever, are watching who's going to back down. And if the principle is pure and honest and real, we got to fight for some stuff, especially right now in this climate that is radically confused. We are polarized, we're confused, we're swinging from pendulum to pendulum, and we're not finding the interest and tolerance to listen to each other, and then hold each other with high regard to fight for a better way for both of us, as opposed to just defend one's own point of view.
The real driver of your fighting was this anxiety you have. And, all leaders, I think, deal with anxiety. And you said you went to school on how to cope with your anxiety. What would be the single biggest thing you learned on how to deal with anxiety?
I'd like to answer that in two ways. I think what most people would like me to talk about are like some skills they could practice so they could work a little bit better with their anxiety. And I'm super happy to talk about a handful of practices and skills that were material for me. But the biggest one, to answer your question, is I had to decouple the performative part of me. I had to decouple what I do with who I am. And I was so intertwined and like enmeshed in my sense of identity and sense of self that I am what I do. And it's evidenced by simple little language like, oh, I'm a athlete, or I'm a executive, or I am a parent, I am a fill in the blank. And so when the thing that you do is the defining characteristic of how you describe yourself, it gets really, 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 really tricky because your entire identity is always at stake when you are expected to perform, or you are expected to be a certain way relative to the title that you gave yourself or that you hold. And that it's called performance-based identity. I didn't realize this. This is a real thing, especially in Western culture, that is one of the greatest constrictors of people getting free, of people living what we would determine is a quote unquote great life, is that to move from a performance-based identity to a purpose-based identity. That travel from performance to purpose is one of the great unlocks that I've seen across world-class athletes and executives and humans in every walk of life. Like when you wrestle down one of the big questions in your life, why am I here? What am I doing here? Like what is my purpose? We can exhale a little bit more when we get a little bit more clarity on what that is.
How do you, I think you're getting at a really good point here, because people have purpose. It takes them to a higher level. It gives them a noble cause. How do you get to that purpose? People struggle with that. People, these little pat phrases, do what you love, et cetera, et cetera. All that sounds great. And a lot of that does help you drive towards what your purpose might be. But, what have you found to be really a key to unlocking the purpose that you would have in your life?
What I've done in trying to figure that very question out is I studied the religions, I studied the philosophical positions, and I studied like cultural things like ikigai and whatnot. And what I found is some of the more modern overlapping concepts are, first, we work from what are your core values? Like, what are the most important values that matter to you? And you just write those words down. And I'm pretty simple. I can hold in my memory at least 3, maybe 5. Okay. But sift them down to the ones that really matter to you. And then you express how you express those values. For example, and I'm going to ladder this up to something that's going to help with purpose. It starts with values, then it goes to first principles. The example of a first principle is, let's say my value is honesty. The way I use honesty could be honesty at all costs. It could be brutal honesty, or it could be honesty with compassion. It could be honesty when a person's available to it. So there's a way that I take the value and make it so for me. That's called the first principle. And then what rests on the values and the first principles is eventually you get to clarity of a personal philosophy. Okay, so a personal philosophy is this idea about like, what are the most important principles that guide my thoughts, words, and actions? And it's a sentence or two that is my personal philosophy. It's unique to you. And you can borrow it from Gandhi, Buddha, Jesus, Confucius. You could borrow those. They all have values and first principles and personal philosophies about life. They've done that for themselves. Now, if you want to feel like, no, I want my own, cool. You will be influenced by a lot of sources. And I just don't want to, again, escape from the reality of how important these radical teachings have been for 9 billion people on our planet. And then what comes up from personal philosophy is a compelling vision that you hold for yourself. What is in the most crystallized way, how can you use your imagination to see a compelling future? So that's your vision. Let me say it again. Values to first principles to personal philosophy to vision, And then once you have those stacked together, it's the sum of those that inform what your purpose is. And so now purpose rests on 3 legs. The first is nobody can give you your purpose. It has to matter to you. So it has first leg, personal meaning. It matters to you. Second leg is that it has to be bigger than you. Okay, it doesn't need to be, saving the water issue across the planet, like as big as it gets. It does not need to be saving children in said country. It can be. It just has to be bigger than you, like being a great mom or dad for my family. But it's just bigger than you. And the third leg of the stool, David, is that you can't solve it today. There's a horizon to it. It's out in front of you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a critical thing. And, I think when your life is filled with a noble cause, I think it takes you to a whole different plane in terms of how you will perform. And you've become this renowned performance psychologist. What took you to that path?
I'll go back to the pain as an origin story for most of us is that, I was super unsettled and anxious as we described, but I needed this science to show up in my life. I was a young competitor, good little surfer, growing up on the West Coast, that was my sport of choice. And it makes sense, doesn't it? I didn't like adults yelling at me. I liked Mother Nature teaching me. So surfing was this, great kind of expression playground for me. And there's 2 types of surfing, David. There's one part of surfing is called core surfing. And the other type of surfing is competitive surfing. And it's like oil and water. The 2 do not mix. Core surfing is put yourself in a heavy position. Put yourself in the most critical part of a heavy wave. And when you survive that, you don't come out of that experience asking anyone, did you see it? Did anyone get a picture? Look, that was amazing. Let me tell you about it. That was all shunned. So the mandate in core surfing was put yourself in the situation that is as heavy and critical as you can tolerate. Don't risk your life in stupid ways, but put yourself in those situations to earn the right to know, to earn the knowing of what it takes, of what you need to build, of what it feels like. And that is the reward. Do not look around to see if anyone saw you. And it was awesome. I fell so at home with that culture, but I also wanted to compete. Now in the competition, I was the weird kettle here. I wanted to go test myself against other people that were really skilled. Now in competitive surfing, you've got people on the beach that are judging, critiquing, jeering, celebrating. So there's this whole other world out there. I was a good little surfer, not great, but in competition moments, David, I was a mess. So it's this beautiful condition out. I'm 15 years old. Literally wet behind my ears. It's perfect conditions out in the Pacific Ocean. 7:30 in the morning. There's only 3 people out with these beautiful conditions because that's how many people are in the heat. And there was a competitor that paddled by me. And he says, Gervais, and he was about 4 or 5 years older than me. He says, Gervais, I surf with you almost every day. He says, I just got to tell you, you got to stop worrying about all the things that could go wrong. You're a mess out here. And I thought to myself, how does he know? Like, that's exactly what's happening. He paddled off. He beat me in the competition. Like he didn't leave me in a better way. And instantly I thought, no, this is a 15-year-old mind. My physical body didn't change from yesterday. My technical skills didn't change from yesterday. The only thing that changed was how I'm thinking. What is that? So this is like early 1980s. What is that? What is this thing on the mind? And I knew that I couldn't say anything about it because you remember at that time, David, if you talk about the mind, you were kind of weak. You're a weirdo. You got something wrong with you. Like my dad wasn't having any of that. And so I didn't know what to do. So I privately, quietly tried to figure it out. And then I found this thing called the science of excellence. The psychology of excellence. It's this small little field that was just getting going. And I thought, these are my people. So I took it as far as I could go, as far as I possibly could go.
So when you're coming up in a field like that, and now you're acknowledged as being at the top or one of the top in the world.
If they only knew how much I really don't know.
Yeah, well,
okay, if they only
that
knew.
May be part of it. Okay, but you how did you break through? To get that notoriety. What was the thing that you think you did as a leader that separated you maybe from the pack?
I don't think this is a complicated answer. Is that like I really enjoyed trying to figure out how this science could be applied. So I read a lot, I studied a lot. I was in the dark part of the research library when I was at my master's program is just one example. By the way, I should mention I didn't get into college right out of high school. So I went a different path. I went to junior college, and I feel very fortunate that I had some early mentors that were professors that held me to a standard. They saw this young kind of lost but switched on kid, and they said, listen, we'd love to show you what we're into. And it was a theologian, a psychologist, and a philosopher. Sounds like a bad joke, right? And they said, hey kid, like there's something in you. And do not come into our classrooms half-cocked. They really held me to a standard, and I loved it. I just felt seen. And so then it inspired me to like really bring my best when I walked into a classroom setting. And so now I'm in my graduate program. No one in my family finished high school or finished college or even started college, I should say. So I'm way past where my parents have been in this academic world. And I'm in the back of the library in the metal part. There's barely any lights, there's metal racks looking for all the journals around the science and psychology of excellence I could find, sitting by myself in one of those little stools that, are really uncomfortable. And I just remember like, shit, what am I doing? And so it was partly that. And it was partly my wife gave me this really important bit of insight. And she said, Mike, just do good work. And I think we'll be okay. Rent at that time for me was $700 a month, and I could barely afford it. And so it was like, just do good work, and I think we're going to be okay. So I just wanted to do really good work in this thing that I found to be complicated and beautiful, psychology of excellence. And I didn't have a grand plan. I never wanted to work with world-class athletes myself. I did want to work with people that were ambitious, but ambitious for what aim? To be their best, not the best, but to be their best. David, I don't know what it was like for you in your late 20s, early 30s, but I was a mess. And I don't wish that type of anxiety, obsessiveness, criticalness on anybody, but I do recognize it in people that are unsettled in their current way of being and want to be better. And it's a double-edged, dangerous sword, like that unsettledness. And if you can figure out how to get really good at something and be at home with yourself, so it's the balance between exceptional doing and exceptional being. It is how the best in the world that go one step beyond high performance and kind of start swimming in the pool of mastery. It's a smaller pool, but those that are in that pool, they're working on figuring out the harmony between exceptional doing and exceptional being. And those are I didn't have the language for it when I was younger, but that was what I was most interested in.
Hey everyone, it's Kula from How Leaders Lead. And if you've watched our podcast for any number of episodes, you probably know that a common theme from all of the great leaders we interview is that they are active learners. They have this commitment to continuing to learn and grow so that they don't stay stagnant and so that they continue to see success in their leadership and in their life. This theme of active learning is so important, and it's what David's latest book, How Leaders Learn, is all about. It's all about helping you develop that skill of active learning so that you too can continue to see success in your leadership and in your life. The book is really entertaining. It pulls stories from some of our greatest podcast guests and pairs those stories with insights that you can incorporate into your leadership and into your life right away. Grab How Leaders Learn on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And I think you're really going to love it. You feel David's personality through the pages and through his storytelling, and it's a really powerful way to level up your leadership.
You found your company, and you have this podcast called Finding Mastery. You're good with words. Why mastery?
Yeah, it's a little bit warmer. High performance feels too metallic for me. And on paper, like someone looks me up and they're like, oh, high performance psychologist. It just feels a little too metallic and outcome driven. And so mastery has a different contour to it. There's a different feel. It's a different language, if you will. And it is more honest, I think, in the pursuit to really unlock what you're capable of. Where high performance, it's cool. I'm down with it. Performance does matter, but it's one step down and it's a bit more shiny, metallic, and sharp-edged, where mastery has it's a more honest language than high performance.
What's your take, Michael, on how to build a mastery team? That's basically what you've done. And let's use your team that you built as an example.
Yeah, you have a lot to say here, David. So I'll start and you finish. How's that? Okay. So
people don't want to hear what I have to say.
I don't think that's the case. Okay. I am fatigued by thinking about teams. And so the way I think about it is, how can we be great teammates? And so the artifact of being great teammates to each other is that we end up being part of something that is more bonded and connected. Call it a team, but it's the artifact. So inputs to outputs, I'll make it I like things that are simple for me, so what are the inputs? If the output is a team, I need to understand the inputs and the inputs that are 100% under my control so that I can actually contribute in a meaningful way to this desired output. And a team is not the end output. It's a team in service of something else. So it's like input to output to some other output. I'm responsible for being a good teammate to you, David. And if I am anxious, irritated, agitated, if I'm underslept, if I'm under-recovered, if I'm overworked, if I can't figure out how to use my words, if I can't figure out how to use my thoughts and my emotions to be in service of something beautiful and ambitious that I'm trying to work towards, then I am no good for you. And so I think most of us feel a little bit underwater in modern times. I think most of us are under-recovered. I don't think the stress is actually too much. It's a function of not being exceptional with stress and being exceptional at recovering as intelligently as you can so that you can meet the demands, the exciting demands that are coming down the path for tomorrow. I want to remind you and I that the dark ages were way harder than today's times. Those are hard times, right? Now, I'm not minimizing the challenges of today. I think they're legit. But it's like the tide has gone out, David, and we realized that we were swimming naked for a long time. So the recovery strategies to be able to know how to weather, difficult experiences, emotions, and situations are required. And so that we can meet the demands of the moment. So I need to first invest in my inner life and my habits and practices so I can be a great teammate, so that I can, if enough of those do that in the kind of the same setting, we end up being a great team. So that's how I think about it.
When it comes to teams, it seems today, the human characteristics that no computer can ever take the place of is that you want teammates that are empathetic. You want teammates that are collaborative. How do you think about those two concepts, and how important do you think they are for leaders today?
Let's start with collaboration, and empathy is the big one. So let me start with what I think is a little bit smaller in order. So collaborating towards what? So the leader needs to have a very clear vision of a compelling future that I see myself in and you see yourself in. And we both recognize we can't do it without each other. So I need to be great for that thing to ambitiously take place, and I need to be a great teammate for you. So the collaboration is like a requirement that we understand and embrace that we need each other. And I'm not competing with you. I'm actually competing within myself to be my very best so that I can be a great teammate. That's what collaboration means. So empathy is more of a first mover in this idea of collaboration. So collaboration, again, doesn't happen without clarity of a vision, clarity of the reason why we're going after that vision. So that's both vision and purpose in that language. And then empathy is like, to be a great teammate, I've got to, at some level, really understand, like, what's it like to be David? What's happening for David? What is he going through? What are the things that he's struggling with? And what are the things that he's excited about? So empathy is like, I can tune to your emotional experience. But empathy is not enough. Empathy is good. It's foundational. And you're right, we don't get it from technology. We actually get it from our moms. So moms are one of the greatest teachers of empathy early on. But there's no excuse. like you got to figure this thing out. If you want to be connected to the emotional part of life and the emotional part of other humans. So empathy and then compassion rests on empathy. So compassion is, I have a sense of what it's like to be you, David, and then I'm going to take action in ways that I can help. So empathy to compassion, to collaborate, to be a great teammate in service of this compelling future that has a deeper why underneath of it. You got me. I'm in, David. I'm totally in on those types of teams. And I've done a bunch of work with Microsoft, which I don't know if you know Satya Nadella personally or not. I think he's one of our most significant leaders, CEOs of our time. He is grounded in empathy. He is rooted in compassion. He is principle-based to go from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture so that we can be in service of a higher purpose. And then what they, and in some way I'll be super humble, have contributed to their culture and contributed to this definition. What makes a great leader? According to Microsoft, it's great leaders generate clarity, they generate energy, and they generate results. So clarity of what? The vision. Energy, they bring an energy into an environment. Let's go, let's get after it. There's a just like a symbiotic thing that takes place when somebody's got that passion and they deliver against it.
Yeah. And you've worked with gold medalists, you've worked with, perhaps the top CEO of our time, Satya, who's done a phenomenal job at Microsoft. A lot of times along the way, leaders stall. They just kind of stall and they're not improving. How do you get people out of that rut? What kind of coaching do you give?
That's a cool statement or cool premise. It just to open the aperture a little bit wider. It's like, that's not just for leaders, it's for all of us. But there's how to help. We learned this early on in high performing environments, is that at the moment of something going sideways, something going that's not according to plan, if you haven't built relationships ahead of time, you're of very little service to the other people. So it's well in advance to that, let's call it stall or plateau or something that's taking place, or maybe it's a fatigue or a burnout or, like whatever it is. It's the relationship that is built over time in advance that carries through those challenging experiences. I don't have a silver bullet or magic bullet, of course, but holding that person in with an unconditional positive regard is kind of a first principle that really is important. Really wanting to understand their internal solutions. I do not hold your solutions for you, David. They're already in there. So my role, if we're working together, is to have an unconditional positive regard, understand what it's like to be you, and ask as many questions as you'll tolerate, for me to hold up a mirror to what solutions already lie dormant within you. You already know it. You've already solved really hard things in your life. If you're a leader at this level now, you likely, have been through some real fires in your life. So I'm just going to help pull it forward to my best ability.
I've heard you say that confidence is simply a math equation. Explain.
Confidence is a cornerstone for great performance. And confidence begins with this simple little calculus. And it's this thing that's always right underneath the surface, because confidence is state specific. It's fleeting. It changes. It's temperamental, if you will. And once you understand the mechanics of it, you can have some consistency with it. So confidence is the calculus for confidence is that I am assessing the challenge in front of me and mapping that against my perception of my internal skills. So it's this external challenges in front of me. If I think that thing is way over my skis, and then I start to slide and think like, man, I don't have the skills to meet that challenge, confidence goes down, anxiety goes up. If I look at the challenge and I go, ooh, that's a real challenge now. Okay. And you know what? I'm uniquely qualified. I've got a whole lot of things I'm going to bring to this dance. I don't know if it's going to go the way I hope, but I'm going to give it a great go. You with me? You with me? No? Yes? Okay. It doesn't matter. I'm getting after this thing. So that's the calculus.
To have that calculus and to get the formula to work for you, you got to get your head in the right space. I mean, how do you get into that ideal state that you need to get to perform?
Yeah. So you think about an athlete for a minute. 16 years leads up to whatever practice we're about to have or whatever game we're about to have. Let's just say it's game day. And there's been a ton of work underneath the surface to be physically, technically, and mentally great. The consummate professional, the true master who's committed to their potential, they use warm-ups as a way to loosen up their body, tune into like this, sharpen their skills just a little bit, and to wake up their ideal competitive mindset, to wake up their ideal performance mindset, to wake up the thinking that helps create a vibe that is best for them. So the warm-ups are meant to tune physically, technically, and mentally. Now, the bullseye for the mental bit is to know with great clarity what is your ideal performance mindset. And so we work backwards from that. If I ask you, David, like, tell me a time when you were it was amazing to be inside you, like you were in your best state of mind. How would you describe that?
Yeah, well, I always talk about the mood elevator. I think you got to climb the mood elevator and get all the way up to the state of gratitude. Because
so
I think
you're at your best when you're grateful.
When I'm grateful, my mind's open. I make my best decisions. When I'm angry and resentful, or down at the bottom of the mood elevator, I don't perform at that high level. So I always try to at least get into a curious and interested state of mind, but hopefully work my way up to a state of gratitude.
Yeah. So whatever you do to put yourself into the state of gratitude, I would assume you know how to do that. And if you don't know how to do it, then you and I would open up ways that you've done it well, you haven't done it well, find the commonalities and the themes. And it essentially comes down to how you are seeing the challenge ahead of you, how are you perceiving your skills, and ultimately what you say to yourself. So what you say to yourself impacts your emotions, and your thoughts and emotions impact your physicality. So there's this kind of the trinity, if you will, about thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And when you combine those two, that essentially is your performance. And there's a process to be prepared, and there's a process to be ready, and there's a process, when you get those two dialed in, allow you to perform to upper limits of your capability. So preparation, readiness, performance.
We'll be back with the rest of my conversation with Dr. Michael Gervais in just a moment. You know, the ability to regulate your own mental state is a huge advantage for leaders. And that's a key part of how American Express Chairman and CEO Steve Squeri leads.
My father would always tell us, you can never get too high and you can never get too low, no matter how things shake out. And I watched him navigate life. And I think as you lead a company like this, you're always going to have highs and you're always going to have lows. And one of the things that I think I've learned since I became the CEO is that how the CEO sets the tone is how the tone goes for the entire company. And so I think it's really important that, when things are going well, you stay even keel, but when things aren't going so well, you also stay even keel. But by staying even keel and not getting too emotional over things, it allows you to focus and to problem solve, right? You don't want to be assessing blame. You want to problem solve. And I think that's been important. So for me, my leadership style has always been one that is balanced, never get too high, never get too low, and just continue to focus.
Go back and listen to my entire conversation with Steve, episode 188, here on How Leaders Lead. You're also a big believer in optimism, and you worked with the Seattle Seahawks for, I think, 9 seasons or so, and you worked alongside Pete Carroll. I mean, he's probably the Tigger of the athletic world. Why are you such a big believer that optimism is something that leaders in every field has got to really have to perform?
Well, I think, okay, cool question. I'll answer it 3 ways. One is personal, and it's not grounded in science, and it's just personal. I like being around optimists. I like the energy that comes from people that say, yeah, but what if we could do it this way? Can you see how this could be amazing? Like, I love that exciting energy about exploring possibilities. So that's one. It's personal to me. Then when I look at the science, there's really good science that supports optimism on 2 fronts. One, for flourishing, for living a good life. Optimists report, better across many variables when we study optimism. And then on the performance side, you probably remember this, there was an early research on optimism and sales. And it was from MetLife. Martin Seligman did this research from the University of Pennsylvania. I think it was in 78, maybe it was 80 in the early 80s. I don't have the exact date in my head. But he measured optimism mapped up against sales performance. So he had a hunch, and MetLife went with him, and he thought that optimists would outperform pessimists. And what he did is he took a group of people that did not make the paper screening. So they would not have gotten into the hiring process. They didn't have the stuff on the books, if you will, to get to the next stage of interview. But they scored exceptionally high on optimism. He squirreled away a small little cohort of super optimists and optimists and watched how they performed over a handful of years. And they radically outperformed non-optimists, people that are more neutral, and pessimists. And so the lesson in that research is that optimists also supports high performance. And then the third variable is more experience, personal experience, is that I haven't met a world best that is not fundamentally optimistic. When you add all 3 of those up, I'm singing from as tallest trees that I can, like, hey, develop this skill of optimism. And so notice that I'm saying it's a skill. It's not something that you're necessarily just born with. We will always leave room for genetic coding for everything. But there are ways that you can develop optimism as a skill. And most people reflexively hear me say that, and they go, wait, are we going to talk about holding hands and skipping through, the rose pads and everything's always good and that toxic positivity BS? It's not that. It's not that at all. Optimism, when done right, is ground zero for mental toughness. Optimism done right, when it's not naive, when it's not toxic, when it's grounded in reality, and with a refusal to just give in to all the difficult information, to say, you know what, it's just not going to work out. When there's a refusal to think that way, when there's a discipline to stay the course even when it's hard, that's where optimism and mental toughness coalesce.
I love that because, optimism, a lot of times people just see the world with rose-colored glasses and people walking around going, oh, yippee, yippee, we can do this. But it's grounded is the key. Grounded in the reality, which is the key to really making that work. And, one thing that is a reality that you have to deal with if you're running Microsoft or you're the Seattle Seahawks who win a Super Bowl one year, or you're the Chiefs who've been winning everything. You got to overlap your performance. You just can't have one good year. You got to get better and better every year, or keep that performance going. What's your thought on coaching people to jump over the bar again and again and again? Just keep raising performance.
Oh, I mean, that's the most exciting part. Is like there's more to unlock, and that's one of the differences between mastery and high performance and low performance, if you will, is like this excitement for what could be. And if you don't take care of your recovery, staying true to the standard is exhausting. It's a very exacting way of approaching life, is this uncommon, consistent, approach to getting better. It takes a toll on everybody. So there's a couple things toward it. One is, first and foremost, if you're like, and think about how exciting things could be when you keep going and growing. Secondly is, I need people around me that challenge me. I need people around me that see me and love me and support me and want to be, able to want to carry my water when I want to put the jugs down. Like I need a community, that pulls me forward too. And so I can do the same for them. So there's a bit of a community, there's a bit of personal excitement, and I'll also say nobody has to. Nobody has to be on that path. Like you and I might be weird ones, like whatever condition that you have in your life, you play a significant role in it. And so I squarely sit on the power of people having agency to be able to work within themselves, even when they're in the most dire, dramatically painful, full of suffering, exhausting, exacting, traumatic external experiences. And so I'm still going to shine light, just like some of my heroes in the world of psychology and in my personal life, like Dr. Edith Eger, Dr. Viktor Frankl, people in my life that have suffered greatly. And they keep saying over and over and over again, hey, listen, you play a part in this. You play a part.
So Michael, when you think about your own performance, when do you perform best? What state are you in?
My ideal performance mindset is like when I'm going on stage or I'm working, one to many in a boardroom or one to one. There's an openness and there's a commitment, openness to explore the ideas. But I am at my absolute best when I am deeply connected to the task at hand. And I'm a bit of a competitor in that way. Like I'm competing within myself to be right here with you. There's an openness, there's a competitive drive that's working inside. And then once those two things, and I'm super positive, like I do like that nature. When those elements are tuning well together, then it feels like I've slipped into that sixth gear and I'm no longer trying. It's just me perfectly being with the unfolding moment.
Yeah, I've heard you also say that you have to be vulnerable. You have to put yourself in a vulnerable position to be great.
Well, let's look at the Seattle Seahawks let's go back to American football for a minute. Is that we see them on Sunday and they do extraordinary things on the field. I mean, you've got to be a world-class athlete to sit on the bench of an American football team. So there is nobody on the team that is not extraordinary. Now, to be a starter, oh my God, it's a whole different thing. It's amazing. Now, the thing that I think most of us miss, and I certainly would have before I was part of these environments, is that on Monday and Wednesday, Tuesday's a day off for the athletes. On Monday, on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they're on the field and in the meeting rooms and doing film study, exposing what they don't know, exposing where they are quote unquote weak in their performance skill set. They are putting themselves on the edge of their capabilities, not knowing if this is going to be an amazing breakthrough kind of thing, or they're going to fall into 1,000 pieces. And they're doing it in front of people that want their job. They're doing it in front of their coaches that determine if they play or how much they play or if they stay on the team. They're doing it publicly in front of them, and they're doing it publicly in front of the rest of the world on Sunday. So that we like to talk about like risk taking, but risk taking requires making something vulnerable that is of value to you. And so when you make something that is vulnerable and when you make something that is valuable vulnerable, you're in a state of trust. I trust that even if I drop the ball, I'm going to be okay. It doesn't mean I'm not going to get cut. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to get booed. It doesn't mean that I might not have people pissed off at me, but I trust I'll figure that out too. So there's a deep resolve in like, I will figure this out no matter how it goes, me resting on people that have high trust. And that's what allows us to be vulnerable with ourselves and with other people.
I love that. I think I could talk to you for hours about this stuff. It's fantastic, but it's been so much fun. And I want to have some more with you and do my lightning round of questions. Are you ready for this?
David, thank you for creating the space. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, let's do it.
All right. What 3 words best describe you?
Oh, that's cool. Honest, earnest, competitive.
If you could be one person for a day beside yourself, who would it be?
Oh, I have no interest in that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Your biggest pet peeve.
When the toilet seat is left up and people flush.
Who would play you in a movie?
I get told probably 3 times a day that I look like Tom Cruise.
If you could win a gold medal in any sport, what would it be?
Surfing.
What's the one thing you appreciate the most about the surf culture?
The freedom to explore and the commitment to progression of self and progression of skill.
What's something you've changed your mind about recently?
That high performance begins where wellness ends. I thought and we thought that was a true statement. It was dramatically wrong. So the same psychological skills that support high performance are the same exact psychological skills for well-being.
What's the one thing you do just for you?
Meditation.
Besides your family, what's your most prized possession?
Oh, you know what it would be? Felix Baumgartner. There's 2 things that just popped, and I'll just share both of them. One is my son, when he was in grade school, there was a bunch of Zen monks that showed up at a school for a week long and did a sand mandala. And so they were hunched over for a week making this beautiful mandala that was really large in size. And at the end, they gathered all the students around. They explained what they were doing, the deep focus and concentration that was required, the teaming. And then they said that we're going to wipe it clean, and because all things are impermanent. And so my son was blown away. He loved it. And he grabbed they were giving away these little beads, wrist beads. And so he grabbed one for me and gave it to me. And it probably cost, $3. And so that's one of my prized possessions, if you will. And the other is I was a teammate for the Red Bull Stratos project, where Felix Baumgartner jumped from 130,000 feet, and he commissioned 10 watches just for the teammates. And it matters to me.
If I turned on the radio in your car, what would I hear?
Classic rock.
What's something about you few people would know?
I think it was like I had great test anxiety. I know I shared general anxiety, but I didn't test well. And I was afraid to kind of put myself out there in testing. So that was something I don't think I've ever said that out loud before.
All right. What's one of your daily rituals, something that you'd never miss besides meditation?
Like a moment, a good morning moment with my family.
All right, fantastic. We're out of the lightning round, and I just got a couple more questions, and we'll wrap this up. You coach professional athletes, you coach business leaders. Are they the same, or is it different? I mean, do you have to shift gears when you coach businesses or athletes? I mean, how do you think about that?
They are actually just like you and me. They're no different than the rest of the world. They just have a different commitment, and they found something that they can be good at. And so, but between athletes and executives, the where I spend my time is on the mind, and the mind is portable across, geographic region and discipline. And so many of the same tenets show up, across the globe for people that are really trying to do something special in their lives.
As a business leader, what kind of process do you think you need to build into your life? Because you think about athletes, I play golf, process is critical. Process and discipline around what really matters is important in sports and in business. But when you think business specifically, do you have any thoughts on how you should develop process that will help you perform?
One of the things I think big sport is about 10 to 15 years ahead of big business. And in big sport, elite sport, what we do is we put mental skills training in the rhythm of the day. Okay, so our asset is the athlete, is the human. That's our product, if you will. It's human performance in sport. And so the only thing we're pouring into is to help others be their very best. So the entire day is structured around people being their very best so they can go do the thing that they need to do in an exceptional way, on game day. And in business, there's very little of that. So we have products and services in business, but there's very little attention to helping individuals be great inside the rhythm of business. Psychology in the rhythm of business is what I think is the new frontier for companies.
Is there anything, Michael, that you've learned as you've worked through the what it takes to be a great leader in any field that you try to take home and use with your own family? I mean, how do you think about that? I mean, it's like, how do you transfer that learning that you've gained and bring it home so that you're an effective leader as the father and husband?
Yeah, cool question. And I think it's being principle based. So I go back to that almost where we started about lining up my thoughts, words, and actions in harmony with my first principles, with my values in life. If I can do that with a consistent basis, then I'm in a good place, whatever room that I'm in.
And what do you see going forward as your unfinished business? Because you definitely have purpose for your life.
The vision I hold is a world where people flourish, and so unfinished business is helping decode and activate the best practices of psychological skills building that I've learned from best in the world in sport into people that would never have access to those locker rooms and those special rooms. So that's the unfinished business is like, how do I pull from my head and heart, from the locker rooms and the amazing athletes that have taught me how they work? How do I democratize that to the rest of the world? That's the grand ambition for me.
Last question. What's one piece of advice you'd want to give to anyone who wants to be a better leader?
Everything you need is already inside you.
Fantastic. Well, Michael, I really appreciate what you're doing, how you're making the world a better place. And
thank you.
I hope you can scale this learning.
Yeah.
It's easy to assume that success is just a matter of talent, hard work, and strategy. But talking to Dr. Gervais, it's clear that your mindset matters just as much. Because look, no matter how smart or talented you are, if you can't steady your mind when the pressure's on or when conflict hits, then your leadership's going to falter right when people need you the most. That's why the best leaders train their minds. Just like any other skill, when you do that, you gain confidence. You stay composed under pressure. You become a better teammate and a stronger coach. So here's an idea to try this week. Think about a big challenge you're up against. Then use Dr. Gervais' strategy to build your confidence around it. Ask yourself, how am I uniquely equipped to face this? What strengths and perspectives do I bring to the table? When you train your mind to think this way, you'll be ready to meet any moment. So do you want to know how leaders lead? What we learned today is that great leaders train their minds. Coming up next on How Leaders Lead is Peter Cuneo, the former CEO and vice chairman of Marvel Entertainment. So be sure you subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss it. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of How Leaders Lead, where every Thursday you get to listen in while I interview some of the very best leaders in the world. I make it a point to give you something simple on each episode that you can apply to your business so that you will become the best leader that you can be.